Hello, everyone. As Jordan said, my name is Carla Weathersbee, and it is just a huge, huge honor for me to get to be here tonight and talk about one of my favorite things, and that is marriage. And I love being a part of the Sisterhood leadership team. And I'm just going to say that there are so many women that are talented and gifted here, and because I stand here on the stage, there is so much that goes into that and input from all of these beautiful women. And so I am just honored to have that experience and that the way to get to share with you tonight. I want to tell you about my family. There's my kids, and so I have 3 kids. 2 are married and 1 is single. That was our last time to be together at Christmas, all together at Christmas last year because of coronavirus. But you can see in the middle of that picture is our new grandbaby. Well, she's 11 months old now. Her name is Sterling. And some of you were in the Ephesians study when she was born, and you remember, but now it's 11 months later, and she is super fun. I get to go be with her tomorrow. But I wanted just to show you a little bit about my family. Byron and I have been married for 36 years, and we lead marriage prep classes for engaged couples. And so I want to tell you about a story that happened because all we're going to talk about tonight is managing expectations and managing our attitudes in marriage. And so all of us come into marriage with expectations of how we think it's going to be and then how it's actually turning out. And so that causes this disillusionment when you really thought it was going to be a certain way and it just did not go that way. And so for us, that happened on our wedding day. So we did not even have a chance to really leave the wedding whenever that gap hit us between what I thought was going to happen and what really happened. So we were at the reception. You can see us coming out of the reception here. Not really sure about my outfit. I think those are like gaucho pants or something with pantyhose. But anyway, back in the day, some of you may have done this at your wedding, but you changed clothes. You didn't leave in your wedding clothes. So we were leaving to go get in our car. It had been a flawless wedding day. And you can see the next picture. We get into the getaway car, and you would think that my husband would be super happy to be going away with his new bride, but he does not look happy, does he? And the reason why is because that is not the getaway car that he had planned on. He had planned on a limousine. And back in the day as well, some of you may have been in this season of the marriage, wedding things, but my husband, people played pranks on the bride and groom. One of the pranks was to just demolish the getaway car. And so my husband knew that his West Texas friends were going to help make that happen, and so he hid the getaway car, which was a limousine, and his brother-in-law found it during the reception and took off the distributor cap and hijacked the pay phone that Byron was going to be calling. So every time Byron would call for the getaway guy to come pick us up, his brother-in-law, Donnie, would laugh in the phone and hang up. So the getaway car was not coming. And so anyway, that's why he's mad in the picture. And the limousine that was coming to get us, we had to get my roommate to take us. And so I share that story with you because that's not the end of the story even. We go to Salado. We spend our first night, and it was a great night, our first night. I won't go into any more details of that. But we were supposed to go to Mexico and catch an international flight in Houston on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. So we didn't make it. We missed our flight to Mexico, and we had to spend 12 hours in the airport, so we ended up flying out at 11 the next day. We got there really late, and second night of our honeymoon, I'm waking up with this deep voice yelling help in the middle of the night. I had a nightmare that I was being attacked. And so my husband was like, who have I married? What is going on here? And then we ran out of money on our honeymoon. We had to get Byron's dad to wire us some money. And so it was just kind of one of those honeymoons. And although you may not have had a honeymoon like mine or a start like mine, you have unmet expectations. I know that we all do in marriage. And so that's why we're here tonight. And Byron and I are now 36 years in, and we're experiencing some of the sweetest time in our marriage, some of the sweetest, very sweet season. But if I'm honest, I have to say it hasn't always been that way. We've had to fight hard and struggle and learn the things that we were supposed to learn. So if I could, I know there's a lot of people in the room that are younger than me, some are my age, but if I could, I would love to just call back to you. Call back and share out of my own experience what God has taught me, the lessons that He taught me through the hard struggles, and just to say that you're going to make it. And why is this important that we talk about this? And I think there's 3 kinds of marriages in the room. There are those of you who are sticking. So you're here tonight because you're like, I like my husband. He's great. I just want to learn how to be a better cheerleader for him. And especially with Corona and the election and all the things, I just want to see how I can do this better. Some of you are in that category. Some of you feel stuck. So some of you are struggling because your reality is way different than what you set up to do. So you're struggling with your expectations and you're like, I did not sign up for this. I'm feeling super disconnected. The gap for you is huge, and you're battling disappointment. You're battling anger. You're battling resentment because your husband's not doing his part, and it's making you really mad. And then some of you might feel like you are ready to quit, like you're stopped. Maybe you haven't left your marriage, but you feel very, very overwhelmed by it, and you just want to quit. You want to quit trying so hard, maybe not leave, but just shut down and go, you know what? I'm done. I'm just over it. It's too hard. Things are not going to change. We're not getting anywhere in this issue, and you're just overwhelmed by your marriage right now. So unmet expectations are often the silent killer in the relationship. And I think it's so huge because don't make any mistake that Satan is after your marriage. There is an enemy, and it's not your husband half the time. There is an enemy that is trying to steal, kill, and destroy what God has joined together. And he will tempt you to bury your hurt. He will tempt you to put away your disappointment and to be distracted and numb the pain with activity, busyness. I'll just do the kids, and I won't worry about it. And he is really good at lying to you about your marriage. But I'm here to tell you the truth. God is for your marriage, and you don't have to stay in those stuck places. I do have a disclaimer, though, because a lot of what I'm going to share tonight is not for the people who are in destructive, abusive marriages. And I know that even if you think you are, I want you to think about that, because if you're in one of those marriages, come see us. Please find one of us to talk to. We have other help for you, because a lot of what I'm going to say does not really apply, because a lot of it is about accepting and just believing the best. But if you're in a very abusive marriage, then that does not apply to you. You need to find some other help. So as we think about it, where are we headed tonight? We're going to talk about realigning expectations. We're going to talk about 3 things: realigning expectations, refocusing attitude, and then realize our influence. So the first thing I want to talk about is our expectations. So what are some unrealistic expectations that you brought into marriage? I want to hear from you. I know y'all brought some in, so let me hear them. It's y'all can talk, really. It's okay. Oh, yeah. Did y'all hear that? He was going to be clean. Messy Blair. What? Oh, my gosh, yes. He would know how I feel. If he really loves me, he should know, right? That he'd be a handyman. Yes. My husband's not a handyman, too. He's a lot of things, but he's not that. Okay, what else? Those are good. Oh, yes, that we would never fight. You know, the crazy thing is, we had a couple, we've been doing this marriage prep thing for 25 years, and we actually had a couple in our class that said they would never have a conflict, never, ever. Because their thing was, well, if I walk in the Spirit and don't, go to the flesh, then I won't have to sin against her. I'm like, well, we're not in heaven yet. But anyway, that's really what they are, and they, they made it about 6 months before they headed to counseling. So unrealistic. Any others? Oh, yes, that it was going to be easy. Oh, my goodness, we all thought about that. But you know what? The 2 things in your life that are probably so hard, those of you who have children, are children and parenting, right? They're the hardest things ever. But you know what? On the other side of the hard is the beautiful way that God uses those to shape us. So managing our expectations and differences, it's really no joke, right? So I wanted you to consider some of these scenarios. So think about the holidays, which, ladies, are right around the corner. Are you stressing about that at all? Trying to go see his in-laws, or where do we go for the holidays? And do we mask up? Can we leave the house? What's the rest of the family thinking about the pandemic? Holidays are hard. Do we celebrate Valentine's Day? Boy, I had some huge unmet expectations around Valentine's Day. I don't know if any of y'all have. I got hubcaps for my first Valentine's Day. Just saying. But there's a backstory to that. I really did want them, actually, so don't judge my husband. So holidays, your communication and your conflict styles. Avoider, a pursuer. Some of you are passive-aggressive. Maybe you're married to Mr. Direct. Your internal processor, maybe he's an external processor. Organized, Jordan talked about this a little bit, but some of you are very organized. You're structured. You are planned out, but you're married to messy, spontaneous, disorganized. It'll all work out, right? We don't have to be organized. How many of us have just been overwhelmed, too, by the differences in how we've handled, not to mention like an election year, a pandemic, all the stuff. So you're like, wow, no wonder marriage is a lot of work, because there's a lot to talk about. So the things about expectations, too, is that we don't even know that we have these expectations until they're not met, right? And that happened to us in the first part of our marriage. I grew up in a little town in Louisiana, and we had tall pine trees, and the leaves would fall, and I had the best memories of all of my family getting out there and raking up the leaves, and then we'd jump in them, and then we'd rake them up again and jump in them, and then my dad would take his cigar, and he would light the leaves on fire, and it was just so awesome. We had so much fun. Well, my husband grew up in Rotan, Texas, West Texas, where there were no trees, and when trees fell on the ground, man, these West Texas people took pride in their leaf-littered yards. And you don't rake the leaves up. So you can imagine, we move into our house. It has a lot of trees. The leaves fall. I'm like, let's go rake the leaves. Let's go rake the leaves. And he's like, no, we're not raking the leaves. And so, y'all, this is leaves on the ground that are going to die. And we are in a knockdown, drag out. Every fall when the leaves fall, it is a clash. And so I had to ask myself, y'all, these are leaves, dead things. What in the world? Was my expectation unreasonable? Was it unrealistic that happened? Was it unspoken? Because so many times we have expectations, but we don't even tell our spouse anything about it. They have no idea until we stomp around the kitchen and slam doors, and we don't really say what they are. So ladies, let's speak our expectations. Let's look at them to see if they're unrealistic or if they're unreasonable, or let's look at them to see if even, what they are, because a lot of times there's compromise around those things, and there's the ability to adapt. So I want to share with you, though, a mindset shift that was really huge for me in the middle of one of our darkest seasons. We had been to counseling once when we started Legacy, because I didn't want to start Legacy, and I wanted the counselor to fix him. Some of you have heard that story, but so we were in a season of struggle, and I was just so frustrated, and we were very disconnected, and so we get on this plane to go to Spain, but not in the rain, and we're going to go to serve these missionaries and do a family camp. And this lady gives us a box of books to take to the missionaries. And so it's a long plane ride. So we're like, let's look through the books. And one of them was called Sacred Marriage. And Byron is like, why do they give all the bad books to the missionaries? But we read it on the way over, and I didn't read it. He read it. I read it on the way back, and we were just devouring this book. And the tagline really got me, even before we opened the page. And it says, what if God intended marriage to make us holy more than to make us happy? Because, I was just on this journey of my expectations of him, and I'm not happy. And what if your husband's weaknesses? What if your weaknesses? What if my weaknesses and our differences because of those weaknesses or because of those differences? What if that was the very thing that God wanted to use to make me more like him? That is a paradigm shift, right? Because we push back on that kind of stuff, and we want to make our lives easy and comfortable. But you know what? God used this book to help me see that I was so stuck in my pride. I was so discontent and disappointed because I wasn't getting what I wanted. My pride had blinded me. Byron felt like he never measured up to my expectations, that he couldn't do anything right. My joy and my sense of well-being were very tethered to his responses to me. And so if he didn't respond like I wanted him to, I would pout and get mad. And being an Enneagram 2, I feel like I was, and I struggle with this still, just a little tad bit codependent on him because I just needed him to approve, and, I just put too much of my pressure on him. And I had to realize that, through reading this book and through a series of a lot of things, I had to change my expectations from what I wanted out of the marriage and from Byron to what God expected of me. So that was a huge, huge thing, because my pride, thinking that I knew what was best, thinking that I had all of the right things, it blinded me to the gift that my husband was to me. And I had made marriage into an idol. And so we had both realized that we were just really focusing like this instead of up. And so it was really huge for us to shift that mindset because there was no way in the world that Byron could carry the weight of those expectations, the weight of my well-being, the weight of my joy. He was never meant to do that, and our husbands never was meant to do that. What we hope in will define us. And so if we're hoping in the election, that's going to define us. If we're hoping in our husbands, what we put our hope in will eventually define us, and it will control us to some extent. And so I was having to really ask myself, what is my hope in? And some verses that I really fed myself on and during this season is Psalm 62:1. My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. And I love what 1 Corinthians 7:17 says, especially in the Message Bible. Don't be wishing you were someplace else or with someone else. We were laughing on the leadership team because we were wondering, do all the married people want to be in the single room? And all the single women want to be in the married room? Don't be wishing you were someplace else or with someone else. Where you are right now is God's place for you. Live and obey and love and believe right there, right where you are with your man that God gave you. God, not your marital status, defines your life. And I love 1 John 4:19. It says, we love because he first loved us. And anytime our love is dry for our husbands, it's because we're not tapping into our source. We love because he first loved us. To summarize these verses, Ruth Graham, if Ruth Graham is ever dissatisfied with Billy Graham, oh my goodness. But listen to what she says. I pity the married couple who expect too much from one another. It's a foolish woman who expects her husband to be to her what only Jesus Christ can be, always ready to forgive, totally understanding, unendingly patient, invariably tender and loving, unfailing in every area, anticipating every need, and making more than adequate provision. Such expectations put a man under an impossible strain. So, ladies, it is so crucial that we understand to realign our expectations from what we expect of our spouse to what God expects of us. We can't make any person do what we think they should do, but we can surrender. We can just surrender to what God would have us do. So, moving from his biggest critic to his biggest cheerleader, his biggest fan, not only requires us to realign our expectations, but it also requires us to refocus our attitude. And part of that surrendering into what God would have us do, this is a big surrender, ladies, because I don't know about you, but griping is my native tongue. And giving thanks and being grateful is a second language to me. But in dating, the difference is added spice, and they created, do you remember back when you were dating? Some of you, that's not very long ago, but the difference is they added spice and they created attraction, right? So I think that, but after you get married, it becomes an irritant, and it becomes something you have to, what once was something that you had to accommodate, whether it's a messy husband or whatever it is, you now have to live with it when you're married. And so what happens is, we begin to get frustrated about that. So, for example, in our marriage, our first date, we went to play racquetball, and I beat Byron in racquetball. And he was like, oh, I love her. She is competitive. She is so competitive, and I really like that in a woman. But you know what? After we got married, everything became a competition. I was smarter than you. I'm more spiritual than you. I eat better than you. I work out more than you. And suddenly, my competitive spirit drove him crazy. So also, for the other way around, I was very attracted to Byron's independence and to his critical thinking. He is just a free spirit, and he didn't just go with the flow. He pushed against the status quo, and I was like, oh, he's his own man. I really like that. But when we got married, I started to call him opinionated and cynical, and why do you have to push back on everything? And so I think it's so interesting to see that it's our natural tendency to begin to define ourselves before marriage by what they are and after marriage by what they're not. And we have to fight against this. We cannot let this happen because it's those differences that we're attracted to in dating that tend to drive us to counseling later. So to move from his biggest critic to his biggest fan requires us to put on gratitude, to really choose gratitude, choose to be grateful. So being thankful, like I said earlier, takes practice. That's why the Bible says over 300 times to give thanks. The word thankful is used in over 300 times. It is not our first language. It's our second language. It is not what comes naturally. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 tells us, or 5:18 says, instructs us to give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And a few verses before that, Paul tells us to encourage one another and build each other up. Why are you grateful for your spouse? What are you grateful for in him? Gratitude shifts our focus from expectation and entitlement to delight and wonder. And it breathes life into our spouse. It really brings security and freedom. And so a practical challenge that I was giving during our hard season, and also through a book that I highly recommend, it's called What's It Like to Be Married to Me? It's by Linda Dillow. Has anyone ever heard of that book? So good, y'all. I mean, can you imagine going through that book, What's It Like to Be Married to Me? It asks you all kinds of questions. What's it like to make love to me? Why am I so angry at you? What do I really want? It is fantastic. But in this book, we were challenged to make a gratitude journal and to write down all the things that we are grateful for. Every day, you make a list of the things that you're grateful for, and then you share it with your husband, and you tell him about it. And I want to give you that challenge, that you would choose to start thinking of things that you're grateful for. Because here's the trick that Satan will do, the great deceiver, the one that wants to separate you. He will tell you all the things that your husband is not, and he'll make you zero in on that one thing that is missing. Whether he can't fix anything around the house, he doesn't know how I feel, all the things, he'll make you zero in on that one thing when there are a million things that your husband is great at and he's doing right under your feet, and you can't see it because you're so blinded. So really put on gratitude. It is, and sometimes giving thanks is hard when we don't feel thankful. It's easy to give thanks when your husband's great. But what about for those of you who your husband is really struggling to love you well right now? And you're like, oh, I don't know. I don't think I can do it. It is so hard for me to give thanks when all I want to do is punch him in the face. It is so hard. But I want to tell you that it's during those times that we choose to give thanks that God sees us and he gives us the power to love, and he gives us what we need. And there's something that happens in us, that he shapes us and he molds us. I love what Hebrews 13:15 says. Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise. It's a sacrifice, the fruit of lips that openly profess his name. It's not going to be easy, but it changes I don't know, when I started being more thankful for Byron, it changed the whole tone of our relationship. So when we realign our expectations, when we refocus attitude, it greatly impacts our influence. So that's the third point, realize influence. Ladies, we have a far-reaching influence in the life of our husband. Byron tells me all the time that he could go and speak to a group of people, or he could go and lead something, a retreat, and everyone could come up and tell him, like, you did a great job. But when I tell him, it really counts like 20 times more. The power of influence that you have on your husband, he values, like the weight that you carry with your actions and your words is so, so huge. And your influence matters in your husband's life. There is nothing more powerful than the influence of a godly wife to shift and influence. We can't change our husbands. Don't even try. It will not get you anywhere, but we can influence them. And even 1 Peter 3 talks about how they can be won over without a word as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. And I think that Proverbs 31:10 through 12 talks about this. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. How you love your husband matters. It matters to him. It matters to your children. The greatest gift that you can give your children is a healthy marriage. And I think that the mom who loves their husband well, no matter if the marriage, like we work with engaged couples a lot, so we ask about their family backgrounds, and they will sometimes even tell us, my dad, I don't know, he didn't do a lot for the marriage, but my mom, like, I want to love my spouse like my mom loved my dad. And your children are watching, and you can influence them in the power of a legacy of a healthy marriage. And you're only control, like Jordan Browning says, you're only responsible for your responses. You can't change your husband, but you can be the one that helps set that example for your children and leave a legacy for them, for the next generation. Your marriage also matters in the lives of others. You and your husband, what a gift. And this is a higher calling than your own happiness, but to get to display every single day a picture, an earthly picture of a heavenly reality of Christ's love for his church. Christ had to die so that he could love the church. And we get to paint that picture. I love what Ephesians 5:31 says, for what reason? To be a picture of Christ and the church. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother. They will be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This intimacy, this connection, this oneness. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. And what is it that others see displayed in your love for your husband? What are they watching? What is it that you're painting the picture of? I want to take you back to our wedding day. This is my handsome hubby on our wedding day. He's pretty much perfect, and his tie, or his, like, whatever he's got on, what is that? His tux. And I thought, oh my gosh, the man of my dreams. But you know what? We have a picture of the perfect partner, but we marry an imperfect person. So we're left with two choices. We can tear up the person and accept the picture, or we can tear up our picture and we can hold to the person and accept the person. And I don't know about you, but I want so much to tear up my picture of all the expectations that I had of this picture-perfect husband. And isn't that how God loved us? He sent his son, who was perfect, to be ripped up apart for us so that he could save an imperfect person like me and bring me into his presence and love me with his unconditional love and restore my life back to make me holy as he is holy. He loved me that much, and that is the love that he wants us to have for our husbands. And I think because Jesus made a way for us to draw near to God, we are not left alone in our marriage. So whether you're here and you're stuck and you're so frustrated, or you feel like you want to stop, no matter what, he is with you and he's going to provide for you. And if I could call back, maybe you just need to hear, you're going to make it. Like, you're going to make it. And it's worth every bit of effort you can give, every bit of effort. But I want to tell you that to realign our expectations, to refocus our attitude, and to realize our influence, that is not going to be a checklist, right? It's going to be a work of the Spirit. So don't push back. when things are hard, because it's God's gift to you to cause you to draw near to him and to need him. Don't resent the struggles in your marriage as intruders, because I know that in my own life, when I've pressed into those struggles and I've allowed God to use them, there's beauty on the other side of it. And even if nothing happens in your marriage, God will reshape your heart, and he will draw you close to him, and he will become your refuge, and he will become your greatest joy. And you know what? This is a temporary marriage that we're in right now. And it is getting us ready for the permanent marriage that we get to have with Jesus, when all of our expectations will be fully met in him and all the pain will be wiped away. But I want you to know that your marriage matters and it's worth it. So let me pray for us. Lord, thank you so much for this time to gather as women. And Father, thank you so much that you created marriage, and the author and the creator of marriage you will and you can sustain our marriages. Forgive us when we try to do it in our own strength. Forgive us when we place our expectations in another human, or even in our own agendas, and we put our hope in things that don't sustain us. And so we thank you that you have given us our husbands. I pray that we would recommit to loving them well and draw from the love that you've given us. We thank you, Jesus, that you are for us and you are for our marriages, and you will provide every single thing we need. And it's in Jesus' powerful name that we pray. Amen.